Renewed calm. Why do Scientologists use so much made-up jargon instead of perfectly good words from the million-word English language? And if the answer is because LRH did, then my question is the same, only about him. Best reason I can think of is something like this. I've noticed that when authors write self-help, pop, psych, business motivation books, the content is often mindless fluff, filled with no new insight. To disguise that, they do something similar, by making up new names for concepts that have been around forever, sometimes creating so many names that they actually add a glossary in the back. Do you think Scientologists do that to distinguish the empty mess that is their message? I discussed in a recent video that I just put out about the pseudoscience and the purification rundown in Scientology. I discussed the importance of language when evaluating pseudoscientific claims or anybody's claims. Language is very important, and I think that when Hubbard first started on this path of writing Dianetics, which is filled with pseudoscience, and began, with the Dianetics work, and then that morphed into Scientology, I think he was using language and coming up with new words and phrases for exactly the reason you laid out, that he was trying to make it seem different and unique and special, and he, considered himself some kind of special scientist who had his own vocabulary to describe this new phenomena that nobody had ever had words for before, and he had to come up with these words like engram and reactive mind and secondary and lock and circuits, and taking English words and redefining them for specialty purposes so that he could seem like he had come up with something new and unique and different. I want to add to that, though, that as the subject progressed and it became more and more cult-like, in other words, more and more controlling and more authoritarian, I think that he added more and more words to it in order to lock people into a specific way of thinking, where, when you develop a special language amongst members of a cult group, then they seem different. They could start feeling like they know things that other mere mortals don't know. But also, when you start locking them into concepts of how the world works, according to the definitions of the words that you're using, you engage in a kind of thought control where you're creating patterns of thinking. An example of what I'm talking about here is like the use of in Scientology the word WOG, W-O-G, right, which I've discussed before, is technically speaking, like by the definition of the word in Scientology, it's somebody who's not a Scientologist and who hasn't found Scientology yet and doesn't agree with Scientology yet. However, the way the word's used in Scientology, you could just say non-Scientologist. You could just say somebody who's not a Scientologist yet, they're a non-Scientologist. But you use the word WOG, and it's got these other connotations connected to it, the way Hubbard uses it and the way it's used as, it becomes a slang word in Scientology for a stupid person, for an aberrated person. Like aberrated is another Scientology word for somebody who's not thinking straight. And so a WOG is somebody who is, by the very definition of the idea, is somebody who doesn't think straight, is somebody who is mentally or spiritually or psychologically messed up because they haven't been treated and given Scientology yet and haven't seen the light. And so you get this, just with the use of this word, you automatically have developed in the minds of all Scientologists an us versus them attitude, right? Which the term non-Scientologist doesn't necessarily connotate any of that. It's just somebody who's never done Scientology or isn't in Scientology yet. But when you say WOG, WOG, he's a WOG, right? That's an example of a way of instilling a thought pattern or thought process just with a word. There's all these associations that go along with it. And that's a control mechanism that a leader can use on his followers to get them thinking the way he wants them thinking. And that's why the terminology in Scientology is so important in Scientology, and that's why it's so important, as I've mentioned before, when you leave Scientology or get out of it, to flush that terminology out of your head, because there isn't anything in Scientology that you can't come up with other words for. And you find as you start doing that, that you are flushing some of those ideas out of your head too, And you become very thankful for that because you start seeing how damaging some of those ideas are and how they have created a mindset in you that is not a very tolerant, happy, mindset. So that's the importance of language in any cult situation.